When our HOA president, Becky, hit us with some ridiculous fines for parking in our own driveway, she had no idea my dad was the one reviewing her $1 million loan application. Ever wonder what happens when a power-tripping HOA messes with the wrong family? So, there I was, staring at this hot pink slip wedged under my windshield wiper, my stomach sinking like a rock. $150 fine, driveway violation, screamed across the top in big, bold letters. Wait, what? Our own driveway? We'd just thrown a graduation party for my sister, Emily, the night before. A few relatives had crashed overnight, and yeah, they left their cars in the driveway. No big deal. Nothing looked off when I went to bed. Dad! I shouted, running back into the house. You need to see this. My dad, Mike Johnson, glanced up from his coffee. His brow furrowed. As a senior loan officer at Lincoln First Bank, the guy lived and breathed rules and regulations, but even he looked thrown by what I handed him. This doesn't make any sense, he muttered, squinting at the fine print. Says we violated Section 7.3 of the Willow Creek HOA guidelines by having more than 2 vehicles parked in the driveway. My mom walked in still wearing her robe, hair kind of wild. That's absurd. It's our property. Dad reached for his phone. I'm calling the HOA office right now. I watched his face change, confused at first, then downright ticked off. He hit speaker so we could all listen in. Willow Creek HOA, this is Becky Thompson speaking, came a sharp, no-nonsense voice. Hi, this is Mike Johnson over at 312 Cedar Lane. We got a parking violation this morning. A $150 fine for having family cars in our driveway. There's gotta be a mistake. The laugh that came through the phone gave me chills. It was cold, smug, not friendly at all. No mistake, Mr. Johnson. Section 7.3 clearly states that residents can't have more than 2 vehicles in the driveway at any time. You had 5. That's a violation. Dad kept his tone calm, but I noticed his knuckles tightening around the phone. Becky, these were overnight guests. It was my daughter's graduation. Surely there's an exception for special occasions. Rules are rules, Mr. Johnson. If we let everyone park however they wanted, this neighborhood would start looking like a used car lot. Payments due in 10 days, or it doubles. Dad took a breath. Is there a way to appeal this? Maybe at the next board meeting? You're welcome to try, she said flatly, but I should let you know, I'm the board president. And I personally documented this violation. The evidence is solid. Call ended. I glanced out the window and spotted a woman across the street, standing in her driveway, phone in hand. Blonde hair, style gesso. Dressed in pricey workout clothes. She was staring right at our house, like she just scored a win. Dad, I whispered, I think that's her. She's literally watching us right now. He came to the window beside me. That's Becky Thompson, he said under his breath. Moved in about 6 months ago. Just got herself elected HOA president last month. I've never spoken to her until today. Later that afternoon, Dad and I dug into the HOA documents. Sure enough, the rule about driveway parking was there. But it was buried on page 37 of a 50-page handbook we'd barely skimmed when we moved in 3 years ago. This is insane, I said. Who cares how many cars are in a driveway for one night? Dad rubbed his temples. Some people get a little thrill from having power over others. Let's pay the fine for now, but I want to take a closer look at these rules. Just as we were finishing up dinner, the doorbell rang. I opened it to see our neighbor, Mr. Carter, standing there looking visibly upset. Sorry to bother you, Johnson family, he said, eyes on the ground. I just wanted to give you a heads up, Mr. Carter said, his voice low. Becky's only getting started. He went on to tell us how just last week, her son's basketball hoop, something that had been standing for 5 years without a single issue, was suddenly ordered to be taken down. Then there was the Garcia family, who got fined just because their flowers were the wrong color. And poor old Mrs. Thompson, she got a warning because her bird feeder was apparently 2 inches taller than what the rules allowed. She's on a serious power trip, Mr. Carter sighed. And honestly, none of us know how to stop her. After he left, I noticed Dad got really quiet. He sat at the dining table, glued to his laptop, scrolling through documents with a look of laser focus. What are you looking at? I asked him. Property maps, he said, not looking up. And HOA financial records. They're public info if you're a member. The next morning, we found another pink notice stuck to our mailbox. This one read, "Improper lawn maintenance, grass exceeds 3.5 inches in height. Fine, $75. I grabbed the paper and ran inside. Dad, she's targeting us now. He took the citation calmly, almost like he'd been expecting it. I figured this might happen, he said, glancing at it. I cut the lawn 4 days ago. Mom threw her arms up. This is getting ridiculous. It's harassment. Should we call a lawyer? But there was something different about Dad. He had this spark in his eye, like he knew something we didn't. Not yet, he said. I learned something interesting last night. The HOA is planning a big renovation for the community center. They're applying for a $1.2 million loan to fund it. So? I asked, not seeing the connection yet. He leaned back in his chair with a small, sly smile. So Becky and the board need that loan approved in the next month if they want to break ground before winter. Then he gave me a look, and I swear I felt a chill. Guess which bank they applied to? My eyes widened. Wait, your bank? First National? He nodded. And guess who got assigned to review their application? That's when it hit me, and a slow grin crept across my face too. Sometimes, Dad said softly, the universe has a funny way of making things right. I turned back to the window, and there she was. Strolling past our house with a camera in one hand and a measuring tape in the other. She bent down to check the grass height, completely unaware that she was messing with the wrong family. This is out of control, Mom muttered, spreading 5 bright pink violation slips across the kitchen table. In just 1 week since the whole driveway incident, we'd been fined for grass being too tall, a garden gnome that apparently wasn't on the approved decoration list, the wind chimes that were supposedly too loud, a hose that wasn't coiled properly, and, get this, a mailbox that was 1 shade darker than the approved black. The grand total? $425 in fines. Dad hadn't paid a single one. Instead, every evening he'd hole up in his home office, making phone calls in that serious banker voice of his. Then one night the doorbell rang, and we all jumped. These days, surprise visitors usually meant more bad news. I opened the door and saw Ms. Baker from 3 houses down, clutching a pink slip of her own. Her eyes were puffy and red, like she'd been crying. "Is your dad home?" she asked, her voice shaky. I don't know what to do anymore. 5 minutes later, our living room was packed with neighbors, some I barely knew before. There were the Bakers, the Garcias, the Carters. Even sweet old Mrs. Thompson with her cane. And to my surprise, even Dr. Mehta from the corner house, who usually kept to himself. Each of them had their own horror story about Becky Thompson and her iron grip on the neighborhood. She fined me, Dr. Mehta said, for leaving my medical supply delivery on the porch for 4 hours. I was in surgery. I couldn't exactly stop mid-operation to bring in a box. Mrs. Thompson wiped her eyes with a tissue. I've lived here for 32 years. Now she says my bird feeders are unsightly and attract vermin. Those birds, they're my only company most days. Dad listened quietly, taking notes as everyone spoke. When they were done, he cleared his throat and turned his laptop toward the group. In just 2 months under Becky's leadership, the HOA had handed out over $5,000 in fines. But the part that made the whole room gasp? They'd already collected more than $122,000 total. And that's not even the worst part, Dad said, scrolling through a document on his laptop. According to the HOA bylaws, all fine money is supposed to go directly toward community improvements. He paused, looking around the room. But, he continued, if you check the HOA's official financial statements, there's no sign of any of those recent fines showing up in the records. Mrs. Garcia furrowed her brow. So, what does that mean? Dad spoke slowly, clearly. It means the money might be going somewhere else. And when you're applying for a $1.2 million loan, that's a big problem. The room fell completely silent as everyone took that in. So, what can we even do? Mr. Carter finally asked. Dad gave a small smile. Becky doesn't know it yet, but as part of the loan review process, I've officially requested a full audit of all HOA finances from the past year. He held up a folder. Totally standard procedure for loans this size. I swear, my heart swelled right then. He wasn't fighting fire with fire. He was playing it smart, by the book, professional, and powerful. Mrs. Baker looked nervous. Won't she find out it was you who requested it? Banking laws protect that, Dad explained. She'll know the bank is reviewing everything, but not that I'm the one assigned to her file. Just then my phone buzzed. It was a text from my buddy, Jake. OMG, did you see what Becky just posted on the neighborhood Facebook group? I opened the app and pulled up the post. My jaw dropped. I turned the screen so everyone in the room could see. Becky had gone on a long rant, accusing certain families of dragging down property values by ignoring neighborhood rules and community pride. She didn't say our names, but, come on. Everyone knew exactly who she meant. She's trying to turn the whole neighborhood against us, Mom said, rubbing her temples. Dad just stayed cool. This actually works in our favor. She's building a public record of her behavior. Later that afternoon, while I was walking our dog Max, I noticed something weird. Becky's best friend, Dana, had parked this massive RV along the side of her yard. Like, practically spilling into the neighbor's space. And guess what? The same rules Becky loved quoting made it crystal clear. Recreational vehicles weren't allowed to be stored anywhere on a property. At all. I snapped a photo and showed it to Dad when I got home. He raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Let's keep track of everything. That night over dinner, Dad laid out the plan. The HOA board meets next Tuesday, he said. I think it's time we all showed up. You really think she'll let us speak? I asked. She can try to shut us down, Dad replied. But by the bylaws, members have the right to address the board. He was right. By the time Tuesday rolled around, the community center meeting room was packed, way more than usual. Becky looked caught off guard as she called the meeting to order. The front rows that were usually empty, filled with familiar faces. Neighbors, friends, people who'd finally had enough. When she got to the community center renovation item on the agenda, she tried to blow past it. The loan application is moving forward as planned, she said quickly. Now, moving on to... Excuse me, Dad said, standing up. As a homeowner, I'd like to hear more about this loan. Becky's smile tightened like a rubber band about to snap. Those details are confidential, Mr. Walker. But Dad didn't flinch. Actually, he said evenly, because this loan uses our shared property as collateral, the HOA is required to disclose full details to its members. That's in the bylaws. Article 4, Section 2. You could hear a pin drop. Becky's face turned bright red. Fine, she snapped. We're borrowing $1.2 million from First National Bank. It's for major renovations to the community center. The application is currently under review. And what's the status of that review? Dad asked, voice calm as ever. Becky's eye twitched slightly. There have been some unexpected requests for additional documentation. Like what? Someone from the back row shouted. She clenched her jaw. Financial records, she muttered. It's just some red tape. Nothing serious. That's when Dad raised his hand again. Dad raised his hand again. While we're on the subject of finances, he said calmly, I'd like to bring up something else, fine collection. He held up a printed page. According to the most recent quarterly report, the HOA only recorded $3,200 in collected fines. But based on what many of us here have paid, that number seems way off. I glanced at Becky. Her eyes flicked over to Dana, who was frantically shaking her head. You could almost see the panic rising. Those recent fines haven't been processed yet, Becky stammered, trying to sound confident but clearly rattled. Then, from the back of the room, an elderly man stood up. I paid my fine 8 weeks ago, he said loudly. You cashed my check the very next day. And that was all it took. Suddenly, everyone started talking at once. People were pulling out copies of receipts, comparing dates, names, amounts. All of them furious, and none of their payments showed up in the official records. Becky started banging her gavel like crazy. "This meeting is adjourned," she shouted, trying to be heard over the noise. But the damage was done. As people filed out, the place was buzzing, neighbors whispering, pointing, talking about what they just heard. You could feel the shift. In the hallway, Becky cornered Dad. I stayed close enough to catch every word. "I don't know what game you're playing, Walker," she hissed, her voice low and sharp, "but you're messing with the wrong person. You're making a powerful enemy." Dad didn't blink. He looked her dead in the eyes and said, "I'm not playing games, Becky. I'm just making sure this community follows the rules. All of them." We walked home together under the streetlights, our neighbors trailing behind like some kind of silent parade. "What happens now?" Mrs. Thompson asked softly. Dad thought for a second. "The bank's audit should come back within 2 weeks," he said. He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't have to. Everyone knew what he meant. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something just felt off. Around midnight, I heard a car door shut. I peeked through my blinds and saw someone creeping through our front yard with a flashlight. Then, bam, our motion lights snapped on, flooding the lawn with light. It was Becky. She jumped at the light like a guilty raccoon, clutching something in her hands. Then she bolted, ran to her car and drove off without looking back. The next morning, we stepped outside and just froze. Every single garden plant had been yanked from the soil, uprooted and thrown across the yard like trash. And taped to our front door, fluttering in the breeze, was a new citation: landscaping debris fine, $200. But Becky had made a critical mistake. Our doorbell camera? It caught everything. Dad came home, slammed his briefcase down on the kitchen table, and for once, he looked truly furious. "You know what landed on my desk today?" he asked, pulling out a thick folder stamped with the Willow Ridge HOA logo. I blinked. "No way." He nodded, opening the folder and spreading the papers across the table. "They're requesting a $1.2 million loan for their precious community center renovation." And then he looked right at me. "Guess which bank they came to?" "First National," I whispered, my eyes going wide. "Exactly. And guess who's the senior loan officer assigned to review their application?" His expression was somewhere between amusement and sweet, sweet revenge. I couldn't believe it. The same day Becky slapped us with those citations, she had submitted paperwork to my dad's bank. Life really did have a sense of humor. "This doesn't mean we can just deny them," Dad said seriously, always the professional. "But it does mean I'll be reviewing every line of their financials very, very carefully." Before we could say anything else, the doorbell rang. I opened it, and there it was. Another yellow slip. Violation: unapproved garden plants. Fine, $200. "You've got to be kidding me." I held the paper up. "These plants have been here for 5 years. Dad took the slip and scanned it with that same sharp look he used at the bank. "This one's dated today," he said. "Just hours after our phone call with Becky." "That can't be a coincidence," I muttered. "No," Dad agreed quietly. "It's not. This is personal now." That night, sleep was impossible. From my bedroom window, I watched Becky's house across the street. Her lights were still on, even after midnight. And I couldn't help but wonder, did she know what kind of storm she'd stirred up? The next morning, the mailman dropped off a certified letter. Inside, another fine. This time, our garbage bin was visible from the street. $250? I shouted, waving the letter in disbelief. "Dad, come on." That morning over breakfast, I mentioned the latest citation. "They weren't even outside," I said. Dad didn't say much at first. Instead, he opened his laptop and started typing like a man on a mission. "What are you doing?" I asked, leaning over to peek at his screen. "Research," he said. "Every loan application goes through due diligence. I'm just making sure I do mine thoroughly." By lunchtime, he had already uncovered something surprising. "The HOA has applied for 3 different loans in the last 2 years, he told me. Each time with a different bank. "Did any go through?" I asked. He shook his head. 2 were flat out denied. "I need to figure out why." That afternoon, Dad made a bunch of calls, using that serious banker voice of his. I didn't catch everything, but phrases like cross-reference those numbers, and verify audit trail flew by like a foreign language. Whatever he was doing, it sounded official. Later, when Mom got home from work, we filled her in. She's a real estate attorney, so naturally, she had her own take on things. HOAs are legally required to keep detailed financial records, she explained. And homeowners, every member, have the right to review them. Even if the president absolutely hates us? I asked. Mom grinned. Especially then. That night, the three of us sat down and drafted a formal letter requesting all HOA financial records from the past 5 years. Dad printed it out and delivered it by hand to Becky's house across the street. I watched from the living room window as she opened the door. Even from that distance, I could see her expression shift, starting with that fake polite smile, then dropping into pure shock when she realized it was Dad standing there. He came back inside looking smug. She tried to say she didn't have to accept it, he said, setting down his keys. So I reminded her that refusing a formal request violates HOA bylaws. What did she say to that? I asked. She said she'll have the documents ready within 30 days, which is the maximum time she's allowed. Mom crossed her arms. That gives her time to clean up anything shady. Dad gave a little grin. Unless the bank asks for those same records within 10 business days as part of the loan process. I swear I almost high-fived him. The next week was tense. More citations came in, one for a tree branch hanging too low, another for a hose left uncoiled, and even one for not collecting the mail quickly enough. Each one felt more ridiculous than the last. Meanwhile, there was a flurry of activity going on at the HOA office. I heard through my buddy Josh, his mom works there as the secretary, that Becky had everyone working overtime. They're freaking out, Josh told me during lunch at school. Your dad's name keeps coming up. Becky keeps saying everything has to look perfect for some bank review. 2 days later, a thick envelope showed up at Dad's office. Inside, the HOA's financial records. That night, our dining table completely vanished under a mountain of documents. Mom and Dad stayed up late, poring over every page like detectives in a crime drama. Look at this, Mom said around midnight, pointing to a spreadsheet. They've been charging homeowners for services that were never even provided. Dad leaned in. And here, expense reports with no receipts to back them up. By morning, they had put together a list, 27 financial discrepancies. Dad took it with him to work to compare it against the numbers in their loan application. When he got home later that night, his face said it all. It's worse than we thought, he said, setting down his bag. They've been inflating their income on the loan forms. It doesn't match what's in their actual records. Wait, I said, isn't that illegal? Mom's face turned serious. That's fraud, she said quietly. The very next day, I was checking the mail when Becky cornered me at the community mailbox. Your father needs to approve that loan, she snapped, waving her perfectly manicured finger way too close to my face. That community center renovation matters to everyone around here. I stepped back a little. My dad has to follow banking regulations. If everything's legit, I'm sure there won't be a problem. Her eyes narrowed. Tell him, I'd hate for your family to keep dealing with all those violation fees. But maybe, she said, voice suddenly sweet, if the loan goes through smoothly, some of those fines could be reconsidered. My stomach dropped. Was she seriously trying to bribe us? Are you threatening my family? I asked, my voice shaking. Becky's face turned red. I couldn't tell if it was anger or embarrassment, but either way, I knew right then and there she had really crossed a line. Don't be ridiculous, Becky said, her tone all sugar-coated venom. I'm just saying, one good turn deserves another. I turned and walked away, my hands shaking. When I got home and told Dad what had happened, he didn't say a word at first. He just sat there, silent. Then finally he spoke. She just made a serious mistake. He picked up his phone. Dad spent the next hour on the line with his bank's legal department. When he got off, he looked both worried and locked in. This isn't just about parking anymore, he said. This is about potential fraud, and now attempted coercion. The bank's opening a formal investigation before making any decision about the loan. That night, I saw Becky and 3 other HOA board members huddled together inside her living room. They stayed there late into the night. And before long, word started spreading like wildfire across the neighborhood. Through group chats, Facebook posts, and whispered conversations, everyone knew something was going down with the HOA loan. The next morning, a formal letter showed up, sent from First National Bank. It was addressed to the HOA board, requesting additional documentation and an in-person meeting with all board members. I watched from the front window as Becky received her copy from the mailman. She read it right there on her porch, lips pressed into a thin line. I couldn't help but wonder if she finally realized just how badly she'd underestimated my dad. But what none of us saw coming was just how fast everything would start unraveling, or the wild secrets we'd uncover along the way. Rumors swept through Pine Hill Oaks faster than a summer storm. People started showing up at our door, neighbors I barely knew, asking, "Is it true? Is the HOA in financial trouble? Is the community center project canceled? Is Becky actually being investigated?" I told them the truth. Dad can't share any details, I'd say. But yeah, First National is doing a full review. 3 days before the monthly HOA meeting, a moving truck pulled up to Treasurer Ron Campbell's house. By nightfall, he and his family were gone. No goodbye. No explanation. People buzzed with theories, but I had a strong feeling I knew why. That month's HOA meeting was unlike anything we'd ever seen. The community center was packed. Wall-to-wall people. Some sat on the floor, others stood along the walls or leaned through doorways. It was shoulder to shoulder, and everyone was tense. Becky stood at the front, shuffling her notes. For the first time, she didn't look so confident. "I'd like to call this meeting to order," she said, her voice wavering a little. "First, I want to address some of the rumors floating around about our loan application." Dad sat toward the back, calm and collected, his notepad balanced on one knee. Mom, all business, quietly recorded everything on her phone. "The renovation project is still moving forward," Becky continued, trying to sound cheerful. "The bank has just asked for some routine documentation. Totally normal for a loan of this size." Mr. Langston, our next-door neighbor, raised his hand. "Is it true Ron Campbell moved out suddenly because of financial issues?" Becky's jaw clenched, but she forced a smile. "Ron moved for personal reasons. It had nothing to do with HOA matters. Now, moving on." "And what about the 3 previous loan applications that got rejected?" shouted Mrs. Ramirez from the back row. The room went quiet. Becky's eyes darted around. Then they landed on my dad. "I don't know who's spreading these rumors," she snapped, "but they're completely unfounded." Dad stood up. Slowly. The room fell silent. "My name is David Walker," he began. "As many of you know, I work as a senior loan officer at First National Bank. In the interest of transparency, I should let you all know, I'm currently reviewing the HOA's loan application." Becky jumped in. "Mr. Walker should recuse himself from this discussion due to his obvious conflict of interest, considering how many citations his family has received." A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Dad nodded calmly. "The citation started after the loan was submitted," he said. "And they only escalated once I was assigned to review the application." He opened the folder he'd brought and held it up. "While I'm not allowed to share any confidential information from the bank," he continued, "as a homeowner and dues-paying member of this community, I do have every right to speak about HOA finances based on the records we received through our formal request," Dad said, clicking the remote. A projector screen lit up, showing a spreadsheet. "This is the financial summary shared with all homeowners back in January," he explained. "Take note of the income listed from annual dues." He clicked again. "And this," he said, "is the number reported on the loan application that was submitted just 1 month later, in February." The pause. "There's nearly an $80,000 difference." The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, people turning to each other in disbelief. Becky banged her gavel over and over, trying to restore order. Once the noise settled down, Dad went on. "Also, according to the HOA's internal records, several board members have been reimbursed for expenses, without any kind of supporting documentation." Another slide. Then another. He flipped through examples, odd payments, missing receipts, even fines that were clearly enforced inconsistently. And with every click, Becky's face lost a little more color. "What's most troubling," Dad said, "is this pattern of selective enforcement." He clicked once more, and a chart popped up. The screen showed a breakdown of violations by street. The area where Becky and her friends lived? Practically no citations. Meanwhile, our street had received over 60% of all the HOA fines. Becky suddenly stood up, red-faced. "This is a witch hunt," she snapped. "Mr. Walker is manipulating data because his family doesn't like following rules." But Dad didn't flinch. "All of these findings," he said calmly, "have already been submitted to the bank's audit department and to state oversight regulators." That was the spark. The room exploded into chaos. People started shouting questions. Some demanded resignations. Others just stood there, stunned. I saw Dana lean over and quietly pass Becky a small piece of paper. Becky read it, and her eyes went wide. Pure panic. The HOA vice president finally stepped up, trying to calm everyone down. "I'm calling for an emergency board meeting," she announced, her voice strained, to address the concerns raised here tonight." As folks began filing out, reporters from the local newspaper showed up, cameras in hand, notebooks out. Somehow, the press had caught wind of the story. In the parking lot, Becky came storming toward us, mascara smudged, Dana right behind her. "You've ruined everything," she hissed, her voice cracking. "You have no idea what you've done." Dad didn't back down. He looked her in the eye and said, "I'm just doing my job, as a banker, and as someone who actually cares about this neighborhood." Becky's voice broke. "This community center, it was supposed to be my legacy. I was going to name it after my late husband." And for a second, just a second, I actually felt something close to sympathy. "I've worked on this for years," she said. "Sometimes I had to bend a few rules just to get things done. You don't understand the pressure it takes to keep property values high in a place like this." Mom stepped in, quiet but firm. "Bending the rules isn't the same as committing financial fraud, Becky." That flicker of vulnerability vanished from Becky's face in an instant. "Fine," she snapped. "If that's how you want to play it, just remember, I'm still president. I can make your lives miserable." But a voice spoke up from behind us. "Actually," it said, "the bylaws allow for the removal of board members under active investigation." We turned to see Mr. Sanchez, our neighbor from the end of the block. A retired judge. "I've heard enough tonight to call for an emergency vote," he added, folding his arms. Becky's expression twisted into rage. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "All of you." Then she stormed off into the night. Right after that, Dad's phone rang. He stepped away to answer it. When he came back, his face was tense. "What is it?" I asked. He took a deep breath. "It's worse than we thought," he said quietly. "The audit team found something big." Mom and I exchanged glances. "What does that mean?" she asked. Dad lowered his voice. "Turns out this isn't just our HOA. Becky, and several other board members, are connected to homeowners associations all over the county." My stomach dropped. "You think it's a bigger operation?" Mom asked. "I think it's organized fraud," Dad replied. "They've been inflating HOA income, lying on loan applications, maybe even taking kickbacks from shady contractors. And it's been happening in more than one neighborhood." That night, things got even weirder. Unfamiliar cars started cruising slowly past our house. Our trash cans were knocked over. Someone rang the doorbell at 3 a.m. and ran off before we could even open the door. "They're trying to scare us," Mom whispered, standing by the window, clutching her phone. The next morning, while we cleaned up the garbage someone had scattered across our yard, Dad kept looking around, thoughtful. "This just confirms it," he said finally. "We're on to something big." By early afternoon, things escalated fast. News vans started showing up and parking along our street. As I walked home from the bus stop, a reporter rushed up, microphone in hand. "Is it true your dad uncovered a multi-million-dollar HOA fraud scheme?" she asked, shoving the mic toward my face. I froze. I had no idea what to say. Before I could even open my mouth, Dad stepped in, appearing at my side like a superhero. "No comment at this time," he said firmly, gently steering me away. "But we'll have a statement soon." When we stepped inside, Mom was on the phone, pacing in the kitchen. "Yes," she said into her headset. "I think it's time to bring in the district attorney's office." Things had officially gone way past parking violations. What started as petty neighborhood drama had unraveled into something serious, something criminal. While Dad fielded back-to-back calls from bank execs and Mom consulted legal experts, I sat there wondering, how did we, just a regular family, end up right in the middle of what looked like a major criminal investigation? But we didn't know, not yet, that Becky still had one desperate move left, and she was willing to risk everything to shut us down. Later that day, I opened our front door and was immediately hit with camera flashes. 3 news vans lined the street. Reporters huddled on the sidewalk, microphones aimed straight at our house. "Is it true the HOA president vandalized your property?" one of them shouted. I stood there, frozen again, completely unprepared. Dad quickly pulled me back inside. "Channel 5 got security footage from Mrs. Garcia," he said. "Becky and Dana were caught, on camera, digging up our garden at 2 in the morning." My phone started blowing up. Notifications poured in from the Pine Hill Oaks community page. 126 new posts since this morning. People I'd never even met were sharing their own stories about Becky, about all the ridiculous rules she'd enforced, the surprise fines, the forced landscaping changes, and the trees she'd made people cut down for no reason. "Looks like everyone's organizing a meeting at the Carter's house tonight," I told Dad, scrolling through the comments. "They all want to see the documents you found." Dad nodded slowly. He looked both focused and cautious. "I have to be careful," he said. "If I share anything too sensitive from the bank, I could lose my job." Then the doorbell rang again. This time it was Officer Martinez, standing at the door with a small stack of paperwork in her hands. "We're filing charges for criminal mischief and trespassing," she told us. "But I should let you know, Ms. Thompson has filed a harassment complaint against your family." My stomach dropped. "Harassment? We haven't done anything," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "She claims your father is abusing his position at the bank to carry out a personal vendetta," Officer Martinez explained. "She's formally requesting that another loan officer be assigned to the HOA's application." Dad let out a dry laugh, shaking his head. "That audit was triggered automatically," he said. "Their numbers didn't add up, any banker would have flagged it." We barely had a chance to breathe before my sister came flying through the front door. "Have you seen this?" she asked, holding her phone out. "Check your email." It was a message from the HOA. Becky had called for an emergency meeting the next evening to discuss, quote, "criminal activities and financial sabotage carried out by the Walker family." That night at the Carters, the house was packed. People were everywhere, on the floor, standing along the walls, crowded into the kitchen. The energy in the room was electric, and not in a good way. Mr. Carter stood at the center, handing out printed copies of HOA financial statements, with all the sketchy expenses highlighted. Becky charged the HOA for 6 business dinners at Rosario's Steakhouse just last month. Mrs. Baker read aloud, peering over her glasses as she flipped through the papers. "Who was she even meeting?" someone asked. "And why would a neighborhood association need over $2,400 in business dinners?" The hits kept coming. Landscaping invoices were billed to Becky's brother-in-law, at ridiculously inflated prices. Funds meant for community events were spent at spas and fancy boutiques. And there was a regular consulting fee paid out to Dana every single month, with no actual work or documentation tied to it. "I've put together a petition," Mr. Carter said, holding up a stack of papers. "We spoke to a lawyer. If we get signatures from 70% of homeowners, we can force a vote and remove the board immediately." Right then, the doorbell rang. The whole room froze. Then we relaxed when Mrs. Carter walked in. Trailing behind her was Mr. Lopez, the retired judge who lived down at the end of our street. He looked around and got right to the point. "I've reviewed everything," he said. "This isn't just mismanagement of HOA funds. This is embezzlement." Gasps filled the room. Embezzlement meant serious charges. Jail time. This was no longer just about shady leadership, it was criminal. That's when my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number lit up my screen. Back off, or your father's banking career is over. I know people. I passed my phone to Dad, silently. His jaw tightened. Becky's threatening us now, he said out loud. The room erupted. That's it, said Ms. Wong, standing up. I've had enough. I'm a CPA, I'll help sort through the financials and build a case for the DA. As the night stretched on, neighbors volunteered for everything, gathering signatures, organizing evidence, documenting what they'd seen. The energy in the room was electric. Angry. Hopeful. For the first time, people who'd lived side by side for years were coming together for something that mattered. As we walked home under the soft glow of the streetlights, Dad put his arm around my shoulders. I'm proud of you, he said. Standing up to bullies is never easy. But what if she really can hurt your job? I asked, finally voicing the fear that had been eating at me all week. Before he could answer, headlights swept across the sidewalk. Becky's luxury SUV crept slowly past our house, then sped off down the block. She was watching us. Dad gave my shoulder a squeeze. Doing the right thing comes with risks, he said softly. But letting someone like Becky control an entire neighborhood through fear? That's a much bigger one. That night, sleep didn't come easy. The petition already had 63 signatures. We were just a few short of the number we needed. Tomorrow's emergency HOA meeting felt like the final showdown. From my bedroom window, I checked the garden, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. But the yard sat quietly under the moonlight, peaceful for once. My laptop chimed with a new email. I glanced at the sender. Diana Thompson, Becky's daughter. The subject line read, "The safe behind my mother's desk." Dad walked in just as I clicked it open. His face changed instantly. Delete that email. Now, he said, his voice sharp. It could be a setup. If we act on it, they'll say we broke into her office. My hand hovered over the delete button, but I didn't press it. What if Diana does want to help? I asked. Maybe she's finally had enough of her mom's lies, too. The next night, the community center was packed, buzzing with tension. People filed in slowly, but their expressions weren't passive anymore. They were watching, waiting. Becky stood at the front, her hair done up like everything was fine, but the stress lines around her eyes told the real story. 5 board members sat behind her, stiff and quiet, avoiding eye contact with the crowd. Thank you all for coming, she began, with that forced, cheerful tone we all knew by now. I've called this meeting to address the malicious rumors being spread about our HOA leadership. Behind her, a projector lit up, displaying neat and tidy financial statements, ones that looked nothing like the messy, inconsistent reports Dad had uncovered. As you can see, she continued, gesturing at the screen, our finances are completely transparent and responsibly managed. The accusations being made? Totally baseless. She's personally motivated, Becky claimed, her voice dripping with false concern. My heart sank. She had created fake documents. And the worst part? We had no clear way to prove it. How were we supposed to show what was real? Dad raised his hand. Becky pretended not to see him. But then Mr. Lopez stood up. Point of order, the retired judge said loudly. Members have the right to speak during an emergency meeting. Becky's jaw tensed. Of course, Mr. Walker. You have 2 minutes. Instead of walking to the podium, Dad stepped into the center of the room. These financial documents, he said, his tone calm but steady, are completely different from the ones I reviewed at the bank. I believe Ms. Thompson has submitted altered records. Becky let out a dramatic laugh. That's a serious accusation, David. Got any proof these aren't the real statements? The room went quiet, really quiet. We had copies of what Dad had seen, but how could we prove which version was real? Then my phone buzzed. Another email. From Diana Thompson. Subject, safe combination, 24-1, 18-32. Records inside. Hurry. I showed it to Dad. He leaned over and whispered something to Mr. Carter. A moment later, Carter quietly slipped out the back while Dad kept the room's attention by pointing to specific items on the projected financials. This landscaping charge for $8,700, Dad said, raising an eyebrow. The company listed here doesn't show up in state business records. That's ridiculous, Becky snapped. Martinez Landscaping is real. It's owned by your brother-in-law, Mrs. Baker interrupted from the front row. Who doesn't even have a landscaping license? The room exploded into shouting. People arguing, some standing up. Becky banged her gavel over and over. Order! I demand order! Suddenly, the doors burst open. Mr. Carter rushed in, holding a battered green ledger book in both hands. This was in the HOA office safe, he announced. It's the real financial ledger. Becky lunged toward him. That's private property. You broke into my office. But then Diana stepped in right behind him, her voice soft but steady. I gave them access, she said. I'm tired of the lies, Mom. The room went still. Becky just stood there, staring at her daughter like she didn't recognize her. Diana, what have you done? I did the right thing, Diana replied. The thing you taught me to do before you became this. Mr. Lopez stepped forward, flipping through the ledger carefully. Page after page of handwritten entries. This confirms systematic misuse of funds, he said, lifting the book. And it matches exactly with the bank's records. Becky's face fell. Diana moved to her side. I'm sorry, she said, not cruel but firm. But this has to end. In that moment, Becky seemed to shrink. Her shoulders slumped. She looked around at her neighbors, people she'd once controlled, and saw the truth in their faces. For the first time, I didn't see her as the villain. I saw someone who'd completely lost her way. Mr. Lopez cleared his throat. According to our bylaws, we can proceed with an immediate vote of no confidence. The ballots were counted quickly. It wasn't even close. 92% voted in favor of removing the entire board. Becky and her supporters stood, silent, and walked out without saying a word. Diana stayed behind. I know what my mom did was wrong, she told us after they left. I tried to talk her out of it for months. She kept saying it was all for the good of the neighborhood. The following week, everything changed. An interim board was elected, with Mr. Carter stepping in as president. The district attorney officially opened an investigation into the HOA's finances. Dad removed himself from the bank's review of the HOA loan, just to make sure there wouldn't be any conflict of interest. One evening, while I was finishing up homework, the doorbell rang. I looked up, and there she was. She stood on our porch, looking smaller somehow, dressed in a sweatshirt and jeans instead of her usual blazer and heels. Is your father home? She asked, her voice surprisingly soft, almost tired. Dad invited her in. I watched from the stairs as the two of them sat at our kitchen table. I've repaid the misused funds, she said, folding her hands. And I'm selling my house. But before I go, I wanted to say I'm sorry. Dad gave a small nod but said nothing. As Karen stood in our kitchen, her voice softened. I know exposing the financial issues was necessary, she said. And honestly, you could have done worse. You could have pressed charges right away. Dad looked at her and shook his head gently. That was never my goal, he replied. All I wanted was fairness, for everyone in Willow Creek. After she left, Dad explained that Karen had reached a settlement with the HOA. She'd agreed to repay the full amount she misused, plus penalties, in exchange for the association dropping criminal charges. 6 weeks later, moving trucks showed up outside her house. That afternoon, Diana stopped by. She looked a little tired but at peace. My mom's moving in with my aunt in Arizona, she said. I think it'll be good for her. A clean slate. What about you? I asked. I'm staying, she said, her smile small but real. This is my home too. Maybe we could be friends now. Spring arrived like a deep breath after a long storm. The newly revised HOA bylaws passed with overwhelming support, clearer rules, fair enforcement, and real accountability. Mr. Carter, now the board president, organized the very first Willow Creek block party. He even got a permit for street parking. Neighbors gathered right there in our cul-de-sac, bringing food and music. Kids zipped around on bikes, weaving between cars and laughing like they'd never known the fear of fines. And as I sat on the front steps, watching it all unfold, I realized something important had changed. This place, once tense, quiet, and full of suspicion, now felt alive. Connected. Dad came over and sat down next to me. "Deep in thought?" he asked. I nodded. "It's just weird how something so bad turned into something good. If they hadn't fined us for parking in our own driveway." He laughed. "Sometimes you've got to push back against things that aren't right. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who's too afraid to speak up." As the sun dipped below the rooftops and the party wound down, our driveway filled with cars. Neighbors helped clean up. No one left a nasty note. No one handed out fines. Instead, people just pitched in. Enjoyed the moment, together. Diana joined us as we were locking up. "My mom called today," she said. "She's doing better. I think seeing the consequences helped her face things she'd been avoiding." I nodded. "Sometimes healing starts with accountability." "You know what's funny?" she added. "This all started because of parking." I glanced down the block. Cars parked everywhere, and not a single person upset about it. "Now look," she said with a smile. "Cars everywhere. And everybody's happy." She was right. Sometimes the smallest injustices shine a light on the biggest issues. And when people are brave enough to stand up to them, they don't just fix one thing. They change everything. That night, as I looked at our driveway packed with cars, I understood something I'd never noticed before. The most valuable thing in any neighborhood isn't perfect lawns or rising property values. It's the people, the relationships, the trust, the sense that we're in it together. That's what makes a place home.